Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam. Can we just pretend this story didn't exist? In a perfect universe, the Doctor's Fall would have been the 12th Doctor's final story. It summed up his era perfectly. It was a great booking off point for this 12th Doctor, as well as many of his companions throughout the series. However, Chris Chibnall was the next showrunner of the series, and he had stated quite publicly that he wasn't interested in Christmas specials, which is fair enough, because Christmas specials were stories which were usually got lots of views, however, aren't particularly liked by most fans. So he just decided, just get rid of them. However, this upsetted Stephen Moffat, who quickly wrote this story, Twice Upon a Time, written by Stephen Moffat and is directed by Rachel Talalay, the final story in the 12th Doctor's era, and is also, as teased in the last episode, a multi-Doctor story, also featuring the first incarnation of the Doctor, now played by David Bradley, who reprises his role, sort of. He played the first Doctor actor, William Hartnell, in the 2013 special An Adventure in Space and Time, a docudrama about the series. I have tackled about it on my marathon series if you are interested into watching that. And he would later, I can't remember if it was before or after this, but he would later go on to reprise the role in a series of Big Finish audio dramas, as well as appearing with River Song in a Diary of River Song story, The Earthly Child, which I have tackled of in this marathon, if you're interested in that. Also as well, there is this kind of controversy around the story, as writer Paul Cornell has stated that many elements of this story was actually taken from an unused script that he had for a Christmas special, and Stephen Moffat kind of said no to that, and then wrote his own story, which was very similar, with many themes, aspects of the characters, and plot lines taken seemingly right out of that. Whether that was intentional or not, we have no idea, and that's why the case of the story, the case of that unmade story versus Twice Upon a Time, hasn't been so publicly awed by the fan base. And like I stated, Christmas specials aren't usually the best in terms of Doctor Who, especially with the Stephen Moffat era, with the few exceptions. Like, I did enjoy, I know it's not a great story, but I did enjoy The Snowmen. Twice Time of the Doctor, which is also the last regeneration story prior to this story, had some great elements to it, but the whole thing kind of fell flat. With only really more recently, however, with stories such as The Return of Dr. Mysterio and The Husbands of River Song, really putting some quality into some of these Christmas special episodes. So the story could have gone either way, whether it could have been a good story, a decent story at least, or a poor Christmas special. The idea of it being a multi-Doctor story felt really odd. This wasn't an anniversary special, and so a multi-Doctor story just sounded like something that Stephen Moffat wanted to do, and that's really the only motivation behind it all. And it's just very, very strange in that regard. But you can probably tell I didn't like this episode that much. Again, the 12th Doctor story was so perfectly capped off with the Doctor Falls. I'm trying to refuse to try and talk about this episode. That's how much I disdain for it. We start off the story with a previously on Doctor Who, and we actually get clips from the 10th planet, the last appearance of the first Doctor, and we actually get some recreated scenes from it. Fun fact, on YouTube, you can actually find an extended version with deleted scenes of these recreations showing more Cybermen killing some of the people at the space station. Is it a space station? It's a base in Antarctica. As we start to see the Doctor starting to regenerate. We then cut into the Doctor seemingly wandering by himself, refusing to regenerate. Wait, what? This isn't... What? This didn't happen. This didn't happen. The first Doctor is refusing to regenerate, and then we get into the scene at the end of the Doctor Falls where he interacts with the 12th Doctor and they meet up. Both Doctors at the end of their lives refusing to regenerate. The 12th Doctor does point out at this point in his life, he does not remember the first Doctor refusing regeneration, feeling that like what? I don't remember refusing. I remember just changing after it. Though I do see what Stephen Moffat's trying to do here, you know, change is a constant aspect of Doctor Who. And in much more recent times, for some reason, change has been much more of a big struggle. A lot of people do struggle with the concept of change recently. Maybe that's because of the internet putting everything up there. But it doesn't really work here because we have seen the regenerated story of the 10th planet. Sure, this aspect will work for some viewers who have never seen the 10th planet, but big fans like myself, there's like, when the 12th Doctor says, I don't remember myself refusing to regenerate, I'm just screaming at the screen going, there's a good reason for that. It never happened. The whole plot line of this story is revolving around an aspect of the first Doctor which isn't there. Speaking of the first Doctor, this story does some... We'll get onto it, actually. We'll get onto it. And then suddenly a soldier from World War I appears in 1986's Antarctica, asking the two individuals, can you point me to a doctor? If any of you, by any chance, being a doctor. That cuts into the credit scenes, the title sequence. For the last time, we will see this rendition of the titles. When we cut back into the story, we find out that this soldier is from 1914, sorry. 1914. I don't know where that 1921 came from. And he is basically at the near end of his life. He is holding a gun to a German soldier, and he's just like, I don't want to shoot. I don't want to kill you. And the other soldier speaks German, doesn't speak English. And then suddenly time seems to freeze with only this captain character being unaffected by it. He's then seemingly taken away as something odd, something strange happens. He has these kind of illusions, and then suddenly out of nowhere he lands in 1986 at Antarctica. And this character is played by Mark Gatiss, who has been previously appeared as Professor Lazarus in the Lazarus Experiment, as well as written many Doctor Who stories, most recently in terms of Series 10, The Empress of Mars. And here, Mark Gatiss is a very odd actor. You can't really give a grasp, most people can't give a grasp on whether he's a good actor or not. I do say here, it's probably his best performance. There's a lot of great beats, and he really sells the normal, everyday guy from World War I. It's just that the character himself is mainly just a plot point. Though doctors are here to save him, and we do get a few mentions about his character, which are really nice. There's a great moment where he mentions his wife and his kids, and that, you know, he was afraid of death, but he learned to accept it in the end. But then when this time froze, he kind of had hope that he'd survived, and now he doesn't want to sacrifice himself. And it's really some really great, powerful moments. And we do get some really fun interactions here, where the first Doctor walks into the 12th Doctor's TARDIS thinking he's been burgled, and then there's these interactions between the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor, which, you know, it's a multi-Doctor story. But clearly, in terms of multi-Doctor stories, this is by far the weakest. The interactions here are nice, they are fun, but it's something that we've seen 100 times before. The whole, oh, you're going to work out who I am. And then there's that snap moment where it's like, you're me. And a few dialogue of that, which seems very, like we've seen this concept and we've seen these scenes 1,000 times before in Doctor Who, especially in the multi-Doctor stories. Even if you're just going by the TV standards and not by like books or comics or audio dramas, this feels very stale in terms of the character interactions between our two Doctors. That's a crying shame. But anyway, the TARDIS is taken by a ship, and it is the Cathedral of Death, I believe they call it, and they proclaim that there is this thing called the Doctor of War, and like they offer him a peace offering of sorts. These creatures known as the Testimony, these glass lady-like AI intelligence, I believe they are. They want the captain, they want that soldier, and in return we will give you someone you want back, as the first Doctor is let out to like investigate and stuff, and we get the reintroduction of Bill Potts, played by Pearl Mackie. I do understand, you know, how, you know, it's cool to see her back and interacting with the 12th Doctor again. And, you know, yeah, but the Doctor's Falls had such a great, like, story with her. And even though, yeah, the way it kind of ends is kind of like, oh, okay, she goes off with Heather and she thing. It was a great way to end her story arc. And then they just bring her back. Like, I get it, you know, sometimes it would be cool to have like the returning companion and stuff, but this is quite literally the next episode, the next story in the chronological Doctor's timeline. It's so dumb, and especially when Bill Potts here really doesn't get much to do. She basically asks a bunch of characters a lot of questions. She has a great kind of relationship with. Actually, I take that back. She has a few scenes with the first Doctor which are really nice. There's a great moment when, essentially, after they get Bill Potts, and there's this. Okay, let me backtrack a bit. The Doctors have these interactions with the Testimony, and they learn about. They want this soldier. We get some really terrible comedic relief moments to regard in the sunglasses. Weren't funny at all. It's so Stephen Moffat-y. Ooh, look how silly we are. Sorry. And so the Doctors are about to run off. And this is like a great example of how this story fails in its emotional hooks. There's a great scene, or a great build-up to a scene, in which essentially the Testimony show the Doctor, the first Doctor, most of his adventures through time and space. And we see these this is really terrible effect of these kind of bubbles floating around as these show screens different moments, mainly from Day of the Doctor, but also moments with the fifth Doctor, the fourth Doctor. I believe Genesis of the Daleks appears in it at one point, and just all the general Doctors. And this is a big deal. The music ends. Also, I Am the Doctor starts playing at this point. Really strange. I mean, this is the 12th Doctor, not the 11th Doctor. But anyway, the music stops. This thing. There's a silent beat. And now you're just like, oh my god. The first Doctor now knows that he's going to become this adventurer who protects people, and we'll see horrific acts of war and violence, and that's all what he's got to lead up to. And he's just he's in utter shock. He's seen his entire future. He returns to the 12th Doctor, and it's just like, what was that? The 12th Doctor replies, oh, they cut out all the jokes, and then the scene just plays as if nothing happens. But the two doctors realised that the face on the AI testimony system isn't asymmetrical. It means that this face is based off a human being. So they need to find the greatest database that they can find to try and track down what this face belongs to. The 12th Doctor comes up with an idea as he goes to the planet of Vindegard, which is a nice little reference to Stephen Moffat's first story for the entire series, and he's the main chronological series with, I believe it's The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, where the Doctor claims that he has been there before and they've got him in a nice banana factory. So that's a nice little tie-in to the rest of his era. But this is where the story starts to really grind down in terms of watching this as a massive fan of Doctor Who. As this story basically has a plot line where the first Doctor is this sexist, dehumanizing character, where he just constantly, not constantly, but is making these little remarks about how, like, Polly isn't here, clearly there's no dusting, you know, you need a woman in the TARDIS to clean the dust in. You get the scene where the first Doctor mentions that, like, aren't all women glass, and has these confrontational moments with Bill. There's also the scene where where he talks to Bill, he can overhear Bill, and it's like, if you say stuff like that again, I'm going to give you a jolly good smack bottom, which is a reference to the Dalek invasion of Earth. However, he's saying that to his granddaughter, her family member who, you know, he is the authority to his granddaughter in the family dynamic. That works. Here, it felt really strange, really odd, and it's just makes the first Doctor a very creepy and unlikable character here. A part of you might suggest, you know, it's because his characterization comes from the 60s, and that's why the first Doctor is becoming a sexist. And the whole story, which I know this is what Stephen Moffat is going for, is that essentially the 12th Doctor and Doctor Who as a whole has grown since then. The Doctor prior into his life, or at least metaphorically, was this, you know, he has changed, you know, it's a cool character who saves lives and defeats monsters and stuff, but there is this underlining sexist, this underlining, like, you know, bad qualities, but due to change, due to the evolution of time, the Doctor has grown past it and has become the current 12th Doctor, and is able to transcend those disgusting habits. However, the first Doctor isn't that character. Sure, there are some remarks in the series like that, but it's not as poignant as it is in this story. As well as, like, the reason the show, the first Doctor, has these sort of terrible elements is the series, is because it was made in the 60s, and I do get understanding that. But in terms of narrative, the Doctor should have been, at this point in his life, beyond that. He comes from the distant future. He comes from Gallifrey, this mass civilization of people, you know, who are above everybody in terms of that kind of regard, if that makes any sense. The more I'm saying about it, the more idiotic this whole situation sounds. But it just felt more like it's hurting the characterization of the first Doctor than it is telling this story, which is an important story. It's just the fact that it shouldn't have been done with these characters. There are some great moments with the first Doctor and Bill. Like, there's this scene, the scene I was going to talk about, where Bill asks the Doctor, I know you were running away from Gallifrey. I know you were running away from something, from your authority and stuff like that. But what are you running towards? And the Doctor's like, well, that's a great question. In the grand scheme of the universe, there is good and there is evil. And in logically, evil should always prevail. Good needs, you know, courage. It needs self-sacrifice. It needs love. But so really, good shouldn't succeed, but it always does. It seems to always does. And the Doctor goes on his travels for that reason. At least that's one of the reasons. One of the reasons he goes running towards adventure, towards danger, towards new and exciting places. I actually really like this element of the story. That's actually a really great way to handle the series. But anyway, they go to Vindigard, and the 12th Doctor's come here to find the greatest database that he knows. This is again another element of Stephen Moffat not really caring about the Daleks, because the Daleks, like in their previous scene in the pilot, is just kind of a plot device, and we also get the return of Rusty from the 12th Doctor's pen. What's the opposite? What's the opposite of a penultimate? Where it's like his second story into the Dalek. Very strange, very odd. It does make sense in terms of continuity, but it feels like it's Stephen Moffat's like, oh yeah, right, I forgot about that subplot. Let's wrap that up, because we can wrap that up now. We got time now, and it felt really rushed. It felt really odd, and the Doctor basically learns through Rusty that the Testimony are an organisation which they take people out of their lives at the very end of their death, just before they're about to die, takes them away, retracts their memories, and then sends them back to the place of their death, and they die where they are, but their memories are intact and can be used as a testimony, given the name Testimony, for like future archives. There is no evil plan here. This makes it one of the few Doctor Who stories where there is no real villain. It turns out, and that's actually a really great twist in terms of the story, because there is no villain. That's a really cool, neat idea. However, the whole concept of characters, an organisation, taking somebody at the very end of their lives and seem to upload them in a database is something which Stephen Moffat specifically has done loads of times. Specifically, Death in Heavens and Dark Waters. There's another one which off the top of my head I can't remember. Nope, I've forgotten. Hell Bent is also a story in which Time Lords can take information by taking somebody just before the end of their life and basically interviewing them. It's something that it's so repetitive at this moment that it takes a really neat idea. The idea that these people that the Doctor thought were villains were actually just sort of just everyday an organisation which the Doctor doesn't class as a villain. At the end of the day, they are allowed to continue. The Doctor allows them, the Testimony, to carry on with this invention in time, just so they can archive everything. And so it's up to the Doctors to essentially send the Captain back to his death. And the Doctor gets an idea after the Captain mentions something about Christmas. And then right off the end of the story, we learn that the Doctor has pushed time just a slightly bit forward so that when our characters are about to shoot themselves and about to die, actually starts the Christmas solstice, an armistice, in which this is a historical fact during December of 1914, out of nowhere, for no other reason, for no point other than it's just Christmas. Soldiers from both sides just stopped, had fun, played football, sung Christmas carols, and just enjoyed life for 24 hours. And I know a lot of people, I think Mr. TARDIS as well has stated in his story, in his review, that he actually really likes this ending because it was just such an odd moment, but that is the Christmas armistice. It was just nobody expected it, and nobody, nobody was expecting it, and it saved a bunch of lives who would have died. It thematically makes a lot of sense. I still don't like it, mainly because in terms of the narrative, it comes out of nowhere. It comes up right at the very end. It seems like just a way so that the Doctor can reiterate that he will save everybody, and it's something that Stephen Moffat's handling of death in the canonicity of Doctor Who really hinders, I think, this story. It also, as well, is another example of the Doctor rewriting history so that somebody who should have died comes back to life, and there is zero ramifications for this. Also, as well, at the end of the story, that captain character asks the Doctors to look after his family from time to time and reveals that his last name is Lethbridge Stewart. He is the grandfather, or the father, I can't remember which, of Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, one of the friends of the Doctor in later on in his life from the first Doctor's perspective, befriending him in the second incarnation and becoming one of his most trusted friends in his third incarnation, as well as, multiple things. Really didn't like this twist. It felt like another thing of Stephen Moffat adding fan service for the fakes of fan service. He really just every series has some sort of reference to Brigadier. It was cool the first few times because Brigadier was such a big impact of Doctor Who in the 70s specifically. But after a while, it just felt like Stephen Moffat was trapped trying to think of fan service moments, and it's just like, right, Brigadier. Forget about basically every other character during that time period. And it was just, there's just a lot of moments like that whole scene at like I mentioned, the Doctor of War, where the first Doctor sees a lot of his future aspects. There's a lot of scenes like that where there's a lot of references to classic stories, and as well the previously on Doctor Who, and we see 10th Planet. A lot of references, but very little meaning and substance in terms of the narrative, and it really hurts the story. However, at this point, even though I think the Doctor hasn't really learned anything in terms of what he's supposed to know, the first Doctor does decide to regenerate. He thinks he is ready now. And it's up to the 12th, and he's like, what were you going to do? And the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor depart. The testimony version of Bill basically proclaims, she's basically all of Bill's memories put into this AI. However, memories is basically the person. If you have those memories, you are that person. And so she is technically Bill to a point. Also, earlier on in the story, she mentions Heather, and she mentions being picked up. So does this story does that mean that Bill dies at another point as a water creature, and this is where she comes out from? Or is she taking it from the point just before she dies in the Doctor's Falls, but then by that point she shouldn't remember Heather? And yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So presumably by this story's standards, Bill dies with Heather at one point during it, despite they're supposed to be in immortal godlike creatures now, made out of water. Yeah, doesn't make a sense. We get a reappearance of Nardole. That was actually really fun, especially the Doctor is like, when you're dying, you suspect that your day doesn't get any worse. Prove me wrong. I did really laugh at that line. And then we also as well see the reappearance of Jenna Louise Coleman as Clara, as the Doctor has this small little beat where he basically learns that he's got all of his memories back, which lost from Hellbent. The fact that the Doctor regains his memories and has no ramifications at the end of the universe means that Hellbent is even worse than it actually is in terms of the narrative now. Thanks you, Twice Upon a Time. Also, that green screen effect with Clara felt really strange. And so that's really the end of the story. The Doctor has this long speech, which I think is, in terms of the emotional hook, I personally believe this is actually one of the weakest, if not the third worst regeneration in the series. Number one, I think, number 1 and 2 is a tie between the 10th Eighth Doctor because the emotionals don't really hit as hard when you consider the grander scheme of the universe, and really hurts the canon of the Doctor Who mythos and makes it an unfair advantage for the next Doctor. Or the 6th to 8th Doctor because it's just a really poor effect. Here, I think this is also another contender for one of the weakest regenerations in the series, as there's a massive speech that the 12th Doctor gives on after he's decided, yes, I'm going to regenerate. But it doesn't feel like the character. It generally is just Peter Capaldi and Stephen Moffat talking about the show, almost breaking, I say almost, they break the fourth wall, and it really takes you out of the story. There's a moment where he's like, you should never tell, he's basically talking to the other Doctor after him, and he's like, nobody's going to get your name except for children. There's a very odd bit of dialogue. It's clearly a reference to the fact that, children mainly watch Doctor Who. But I do really like the laugh hard, run fast, and be kind. I like that little moment. But most of the speech felt very, very on the nose. Very, oh, look at us. This is clever, isn't it? And really dehumanizes the character of the Doctor, and we see the actor for who he really is. And that's really terrible because it's Peter Capaldi. And it's also, I don't know if this is important or not to mention in terms of my opinion. This is the first time in the revived era where I didn't cry when the Doctor regenerated. I felt nothing because the speech of it was so on the nose, and I basically was realizing, yeah, I'm watching a show. I'm not engrossed I'm not in the TARDIS with the Doctor. I am watching Peter Capaldi on a set. Peter Capaldi absolutely nails the scene, by the way. He's a great performer. It's mainly what's written for him, the dialogue, which I think is more of a Peter Capaldi, more of a Stephen Moffat thing then. And so at the end of the story, the Doctor regenerates, turning into the first female incarnation of the Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. A few things before I end this video. There's some really great shots after the regeneration. There's a great one where there's a few lightings, you can just see a silhouette, and then the ring comes down. There's a great shot of Jodie Whittaker's eye looking around the TARDIS, and there's this really, really weird shot of her point of view, and it generally looks like it was taken off a camera on a phone. It felt really cheap at that bit. It's just a one shot, but it's very strange. The rest of it is so high budgeted, feels like it was great cinematography and great directing, and then you just have that one scene where it's just somebody doing that with a phone. It's really bizarre. In terms of a Doctor introduction, it's alright. She only gets really one piece of dialogue, brilliant, which kind of felt like it was building up a catchphrase for her in the same way that the 12th Doctor says Geronimo, and the 10th Doctor has Allons-y. She presses one button and suddenly everything already breaks and destroys, and she's in all this chaos, and she gets thrown out of the TARDIS, which is clearly trying to be the start of the 11th hour, where it has that, but it builds up, and we see the newly regenerated Doctor falling out of the TARDIS, and basically is in the EastEnders logo, where she's come falling down to Earth on top of actually this is Sheffield, on top of Sheffield. And so that is Twice Upon a Time. Overall, this is such a poor story. It handles our characters very poorly. The pacing of it feels really rushed, and clearly, it's up to the next, coming on to the next scenes. There's a lot of references, which is an issue with most of Stephen Moffat's stories. There's a lot of references for the sakes of references. If you're not a fan, if you were coming into the story new, maybe quite introduced to Doctor Who quite recently, a lot of things are just going to go over your head, and the emotional aspects of this story really hinders on you to be aware of all of Doctor Who, as well as it just skipping over those moments as well as them treating those moments really important. There's a lot of scenes in here that just absolute suck. If it's poor writtenly, if it was just poor execution wise, it's just poorly done. And it really is just a massive stud, a massive poop in the 12th Doctor era. The 12th Doctor's era is a era which was stumbled upon with some really poor moments, some poor decision making, and a lot of people were phasing out of the series. And some of the elements that I have been talking about, like the constant fan service, which have nothing really other than fan service into it, and the rushed plot lines just constantly getting to the next beat, and a lot of emotional beats just being skipped after being brought up, are many elements that made the 12th Doctor era one that was, I wouldn't say bad, because there are a lot of bits that I did really, really, really enjoy in the 12th Doctor era, but a lot of the bad stuff was summarised in a previous story, Hellbent. But this is sadly a story in that line where it's focused mostly on the negative parts of what makes the 12th Doctor era so good, what makes the era so mediocre and not very good, other than a story like World Enough and Time and the Doctor Falls, where it might be a bit weird, it might be a strong, it might have a few elements of it which aren't that good, but the majority of the story works so well. Twice Upon a Time is not that story. Twice Upon a Time is a story which was rushed together by somebody because somebody thought that Doctor Who needed a Christmas special. So let's get all these fan service, let's get all the thing. Because, this story, who cares about the narrative? This is all about fun. Just fun, fun, fun. The 12th Doctor, the first Doctor being written horribly, a lot of fan service, the Rusty from Into the Dalek, just chuck it all on. Bill Potts coming back, even though literally the last episode she died. Just like, I'm a massive fan of Doctor Who, and I love every aspect. I'm one of the few people who actually like every incarnation of the Doctor, and I especially like the 12th Doctor. Some of his written, some of his, and it's just stories like this really show to me why people who didn't like the 12th Doctor, it shows me why people didn't like this era. And it's a shame because this is the closing caption, and it's what makes it worse is that we did have a great closing caption story with the Doctor Falls. Sucks, it absolutely sucks. But on the bright side of it all is that this era of the show is now gone. Stephen Moffat has now resigned from the role, in a role which he should, I think, have resigned earlier on in the series. And we've got a breath of fresh air into the series. But with it good, is it not? Well, there's only time to find out. So that is Twice Upon a Time. Hope you enjoyed. If you have your different opinions, I know a lot of people do actually like the story. I think Davis really likes the story. But anyway, just let me know what you thought of the story. And so join me next time, where the newly regenerated Doctor will find herself in a hunt of a squid creature and blue teeth people, as she befriends new friends and starts a new family in Sheffield. So join me next time for The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and maybe some other elements which I can find. I'll try and find as much as I can before going into the story. So anyway, join me for that, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.